Netflix versus Blockbuster. What really happened? Intro. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today, we will be discussing the once rivalry between Netflix and Blockbuster, what really happened between the two, and the truth behind the bankruptcy and collapse of Blockbuster Video. But before we get into the details, don't forget to like this video and click the subscribe button. It really helps the channel out. With that being said, let's get right into it. The number of bankruptcy filings is increasing by the day, and one comes across a slew of enterprises that were previously well-known but are now bankrupt or, worse, have shut down. It's almost disheartening to see these recognized organizations declare bankruptcy, but we need to understand what caused their demise. This one in particular held a special place in my heart. Let's start by understanding what each of these companies started out as. Netflix, as we know it today, isn't the same Netflix which was founded in 1997 by Hastings and Marc Randolph. Surprisingly enough, the idea for Netflix came to be after one of the founders of the company, Reed, was charged a huge late fee for returning a copy of a movie late to none other than Blockbuster. They sought out to make a movie rental service which would deliver CDs and DVDs to people at home, and thus Netflix was born. Blockbuster, on the other hand, has a lot of legacy. It was an integral part of childhood for a lot of millennials. This might be something too old for some of you guys, but I still remember vividly how it felt like to walk through the aisles of a Blockbuster store looking at the new release section. The company started in 1985, and it was during the era where most people didn't even own VCRs. The company saw massive success in the coming years, and by the 1990s, Blockbuster was the standard for video rentals. It was a decent business idea as well, buying movies on VHSs and renting them out to people for a fraction of the cost till you recover what you originally paid for the movie. And once you were done with renting them out, you could just sell it. Since buying them in bulk also meant that you got access to some pretty impactful discounts. And in some cases, the company even worked out revenue sharing deals with the studios. There was a huge opportunity to make profit in this business model, and they even did the same thing with video games. And to add on to it, they even had merchandise as well. While rentals were obviously their main source of income, it wasn't their only source. In 2003, rentals comprised of up to 76% of their total revenue, while the rest came from merchandise and such. Merchandise refers to the sales of the movies and games they did, and also their general merchandise like the snacks they sold at the stores. All in all, it was an amazing business model for its time. So this sounds pretty good, right? Then when did things change? When did they stop being a beloved video rental store and be reduced to merely a late-night punchline? Although Blockbuster came before Netflix and had the dominant hand over it in the market, it somehow managed to mess things up and lose to Netflix. Netflix even gave Blockbuster a chance to merge with it, but the company refused to take the deal, which it should have taken in hindsight. If we look at their revenue, we can see that the pinnacle of their profitability, which occurred in 2004 or 2005, was followed by a period of decline. Although the majority of people would probably be considering Netflix right now, they wouldn't be entirely incorrect. But I came to a somewhat different conclusion. Blockbuster's demise may have been influenced by Netflix, but this is not the whole picture. We must comprehend what distinguishes the two businesses in order to comprehend that. And the Netflix I'm talking about is the traditional Netflix, not the streaming corporation, but the one who delivered DVDs to your home, as at the time, which was what Netflix was. There are immediately two significant disparities between the firms. With Netflix, they mailed the movies directly to you, but with Blockbuster, you had to go to the location in person to choose the titles you wanted. Although Netflix's business strategy is more centered on convenience, it also limits the customer's alternatives. With Blockbuster, you could rent movies whenever you wanted without having to wait for the mailman to bring them to you. This ultimately boils down to a personal choice, so it might not be a big concern. However, Netflix used a subscription-based business strategy, whereas Blockbuster billed per movie. In this case, Netflix was plainly better than Blockbuster because it offered a complete month's worth of limitless rentals for the same price as 1 week's worth of rentals at the latter. One may assume that Blockbuster should have provided subscriptions in order to compete, but this was more complicated than it seemed. Blockbuster may be ridiculed now and seen to be a bunch of dummies who couldn't adapt to the trends, but things aren't always as they appear. Contrary to popular belief, Blockbuster did not believe that in-store rentals were the only viable business model. Blockbuster turned down a $50 million offer from Netflix in 2000 because they had already made up their minds to compete with Netflix and believed they could succeed. They didn't disregard Netflix's business model, they simply believed that buying Netflix at that time wasn't the best course of action. Although no one could have known it at the time, it now appears to have been the best choice they had ever made. Around the same time, they signed a 20-year agreement that involved deploying fiber optic technology to broadcast videos on demand. Keep in mind that this cost far more than getting Netflix. The technology didn't work once the agreement with Enron was reached, which was the main drawback. Enron went bankrupt shortly after. Given that Netflix was still renting out actual DVDs at the time, if this agreement had been successful, Blockbuster would have surpassed Netflix. More evidence that Blockbuster was aware of the Netflix business model nearly every year, Blockbuster identified Netflix as a possible danger to the corporation and its business model in its annual reports. And there is evidence that Blockbuster itself was considering entering that market with the aid of DirecTV. So you can't say that Blockbuster was ignoring all of this, since they were making efforts well before their downfall. Around 2007, Netflix shifted to a model of streaming movies and shows, while Blockbuster was still mainly following the rental business model. Netflix unveiled its streaming services where users could immediately watch TV shows and movies with a click of a button on their browsers. At the start, this service only had a small catalog. Netflix was going in the right direction, but they were still overestimating how much longer DVDs and CDs would stick around. In any case, by the end of 2007, Netflix had amassed nearly 7.5 million subscribers, thanks in big part to their streaming services. Netflix further increased its efforts to expand by teaming up with multiple electronic companies in the coming years. One of the big decisions Netflix made was to partner up with smart TV companies and Sony's PlayStation to come pre-installed with the Netflix app. This made it even more convenient for people to access Netflix, and it allowed them to reach an even bigger audience. They continued to expand and also made a deal with Apple. It launched its services on the various Apple products, including the iPhone, the iPad, the iPod Touch, and more. By 2010, they had amassed over 20 million subscribers, and this was the first year where the number of users to stream were more than the number of people to rent out the movies. This is when it really hit for Netflix that streaming was going to be the future of this industry. Netflix continued their expansion at a staggering rate, and by 2017, the company had gained over 100 million active subscribers worldwide. The decision to go beyond America and expand into other continents, such as Europe and Asia, turned out to be really big for them. This was the same year when Netflix won its first Academy Award for a documentary, The White Helmets. If we look at it now, Netflix is a global phenomenon, with nearly everyone you meet being a subscriber or at least having access to an account. Let's get back to why it wasn't as simple for Blockbuster to offer subscriptions as Netflix did. The late fees we mentioned before were part of the rental money, something that cannot be collected if the subscriber has an unlimited renting plan. They were cautious to completely alter their business strategy because late fines accounted for a sizable amount of their earnings. Despite this, they launched its own subscription program called Blockbuster Movie Pass in 2004 and claimed the complete elimination of late fees in 2005. The catch, though, is that if you are still renting movies the traditional method, you will need to charge late fees because you were required to return the DVDs on schedule. They devised a method that seemed a little odd. After giving the customer a grace period, they charged the full price for the DVD and said that you owned it. They introduced Blockbuster Total Access in 2006, which was yet another online subscription-based service that let users check out several movies simultaneously. They also offered a variety of choices, including the ability to swap at them at any Blockbuster location or have them mailed by the Postal Service. It picked up steam at first, but gradually the excitement for it subsided because it wasn't worth the additional cost and was more costly than Netflix. They even went so far as to test out Blockbuster Express, a kiosk for renting DVDs, to the furthest. 2010 was the destined year, the year when Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy. Soon after, Blockbuster was purchased by a firm named Dish Network, although they have yet to make any notable changes to the business. They have attempted a variety of things, such as integrating the service into their satellite network, but it appears that they have also given up. It's nearly a depressing sight if you visit their website right now. The only thing it does provide is a link to the Dish Network website while also listing the 12 stores that are still open. Blockbuster failed to adapt to the times. While Netflix played a huge role in that, there were other factors as well, such as places like Walmart and Target selling DVDs for cheaper. Blockbuster also made a couple of very bad financial decisions, which led to the company being bankrupted. By 2010, the company was $1 billion in debt, and this was the same time when people started shifting to the streaming service offered by Netflix. It failed to pivot quickly, and it stuck to its old business model for too long. This became the reason for Blockbuster's demise. The business paradigm for renting movies and retailers is no longer viable. When DVD mail rentals were released, it was on the verge of becoming outdated, and today's streaming services placed the final nail in the coffin. Outro. We have laid out the facts for you and what really happened in the fabled Netflix versus Blockbuster war. Things aren't as simple as they seem, but Netflix definitely triumphed over the other due to its rapidly adjusting policies and business model. On the other hand, Blockbuster tried to cling to the past and refused to change when it was the time to change. Let us know what you think about the case. Do you think Blockbuster should have taken the deal that they were offered? Do you still use Blockbuster or Netflix? You can share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to check out some of our other videos.